Hello, my name is Marlon Hall. I am an anthropologist. I'm an interdisciplinary artist, a father, a Fulbright Specialist, and most recently, I've been given the gift of being a CAMHLAB artist in residence. I'm going to talk a little bit about my project, the origin of my work, and the intentions of what I hope to be a way to awaken us to the memory of our humanity in the midst of a pandemic.
First of all, what was the purpose of you even doing this? And what was the infatuation of why you have to do it now and it's a lockdown? Why would you even consider trying to make this message prevalent in this time if it's all of these things going on? Why would you pick right now opposed to a year ago or waiting a year from now?
Well, that's because I'm not doing it despite the pandemic. I'm doing it because of the pandemic. My passion and desire to do it now is directly proportionate to its need for now. And I believe that many of us, me included, we're all suffering from a cultural amnesia due to the trauma of the pandemic that can make us to forget who we are at times, what we can contribute and others, and why those contributions are important. So this is amnesia therapy for the mind, through music, for the body, through movement, and for the soul, through a ritual of meal therapy. So this is for now, not later.
The time is now. I need you. Hold me close.
When H.E. approached me about doing my CAMHLAB residency, doing a CAMHLAB residency, it wasn't mine at that point, I was in the midst of preparing for a fellowship in Tulsa, Oklahoma, providing anthropological and artful public expressions of support to people, to communities, to cultures that have experienced trauma, with the belief that through multidisciplinary art, we can provide amnesia therapy. Oftentimes the trauma, the shock of what people groups or communities experience in the midst of that trauma, that shock can shock the memory of their greatness right out of them. It can create amnesia where communities forget what they can contribute, who they are, and why their contributions to the world over are important. Black Wallstreet was a mecca of infinite possibility for a post-slavery community. It was a testament to what it meant to be human, to move through pain with resilience, towards innovation with purpose. And in 1921, in June of 1921, there was a massacre in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where over 1,000 people were murdered from this great mecca of a community, this Wakanda of Black culture. I've been given the opportunity to be a Tulsa Arts Fellow, to go for 52 weeks to study not just the pain of the massacre, but also the phoenix that's rising from the ashes. My CAMHLAB residency literally comes as the very last project that I'm doing in the city of Houston before moving to Tulsa, Oklahoma to do that cultural amnesia therapy. I spent some time in the space, in the Brown Gallery, where I was told I was to use every square inch of the space to catalyze imagination in one way or another. Spending time there, I just kind of walked around looking at the architecture. And in doing research, I discovered that the architect in 1971 who developed the schematic design for the space had in mind a series of triangles. This triangular architecture for me resonated because the triangle has been this iconographic shape that represents what it means to be whole. Like the way that we are wholly connected, right? Mind to body, body to soul. It's like this triangular way of aligning the human to him or herself to live out the fullest expression. You know what I mean? In the midst of this pandemic, when the trauma of the pandemic is dismembering our triangular wholeness, mind, body, and spirit, why not cultivate a 3-part series of healing labs that would provide the city dare I say, the world with resources that they can use to remember who they are, back to who they are when what they experience in the midst of the pandemic dismembers them. And for me, there is no ritual like the union or the choreography of music and media or film that can remember the mind to the body. These Grammy Award-winning artists, y'all, it was like 20 Grammys represented among all of the musicians that made themselves available for a night of a public art exhibition where film in 3 stanzas involved the weaving of music, improvisational music, in and out of those 3 stanzas. And the goal was to encourage us through music and film, maybe to remember that the trauma of this moment is not an apocalypse, that it could be a genesis.
What has this trauma done to me? It feels like I'm spreading thin.
Okay, Marlon, so this is the first interview. I will dive straight in. So amnesia, I will define amnesia as a condition where memory is disturbed.
In the beginning, she held the heavens, God in female form.
The second day or night of this triangular architecture involved the connection of the body to the soul. And that line of connection was through bodily movement. And I did a series as a filmmaker for the city of Houston in partnership with the Houston Arts Alliance called Folklore Films.
When I first chose this place, I walked out on the porch and I could see the skyline.
There's an illuminating crown that sings and rings over Houston's concrete roads and light poles.
And so I was home.
No, it's not over. You're not alone. Far away from home.
My story involves losing my sister, but my story is not me losing my sister.
By viewing it purely from the form of sadness, it's a limitation.
This was an experiment for myself.
What I'm trying to do is being a father to my neighborhood and make a healthy, strong environment.
Produce something that would, help heal me. And
to create an environment that was healthy. I wanted to heal myself.
Most beings, most souls have dreams in some way, shape, or form. The challenge is knowing how to attain those dreams.
I had to decide that I was going to be comfortable with who I was and in my own skin. And if I wasn't comfortable with who I was, then maybe I needed to be a better person. And if I was the best person I could be, then I had to love that person.
One of the subjects of folklore films is Dan Houston, and Dan Houston takes yoga into prisons. And before I begin any anthropological film, I do participant observation. I mentioned that earlier, I think. And that is where I not only observe the subject, I also participate. So before I hit record on the camera, I always hang out. I become a part of the community that I want to study, or the person that I want to study. And I start to practice yoga, and I started practicing at the front of the class because I didn't want women to think I was looking at their booties in the back of class. I mean, I didn't know, y'all. I didn't know. And my practice in the front of the classrooms accelerated my practice. Why? Because I was to the left and to the right of yoga teachers and accelerated yoga practitioners. And when the film was done, I returned to my yoga practice for myself because it provided liberation for me. an emancipation proclamation of my soul through my body. In fact, I believe that the four corners of my mat became this liberation architecture, where when my body got connected to my soul, it set me free from the vestiges of slavery that could be woven into the fabric of my way of thinking as an African-American man, a way of thinking where for many years the social constructs of our country have taught us that we are owned by someone else and that we cannot take ownership of our lives or of our communities. And I took ownership of my life as a human being for the first time in my life through the practice of yoga. And I wanted to teach that, not just as a human, but as an anthropologist, because I wanted to teach people to not just be participants in their bodies, but also to levitate above the mat, to become observers as well, to observe your own humanity and to honor it, and to find connection, body to soul, and liberation, mind, body, and soul. I thought to myself, I would always, in one way or another, integrate the practice of yoga in my practice as an anthropologist and as an artist, as a service to the world, as an offering to the world.
The start of my yoga practice was the obstacle of my mother getting cancer. The whole concept that I'm serving, and it's like being devotional to and really serving my mother through this journey to the end. You can't hold them up, you can't do anything. The only thing you can do is really just breathe, and breathe with them and breathe for them. And that was, now that I reflect back, that was really the start of my yoga practice. That has really taken on my entire life.
Second night of this triangular architecture was the practice of movement as a way to remember us to who we are as human beings, the way I was remembered to who I am as a human being through the practice of yoga. I believe that if the world is going to come out of the pandemic with any new evolution of what it means to be us, that world will be led by feminine energy. It will be led by women and those who honor feminine energy, like Robert Bustani, like Nancy Perry, like the 9 women who practiced. God bless y'all, by the way, who practiced that night. Women and the feminine energy knows how to hold life, but also is courageous enough to learn how to deliver life in a way that we need life to be delivered from the pain, the loss, and the new prospect of possibility that comes as a result of the pandemic. There was a triangular structure of 9 women who were led in a yoga practice by Nancy Perry, who is a powerhouse of a yoga teacher and a woman in the city of Houston, and also Robert Bustani, who is a landmark teacher through yoga. And there was a micro orchestra of 3 people, Joshua on the sound bowls, and Bernice sonically playing the bass, and Michelle Thibault vocally performing this energetic force in concert with the teachers and the music that made an antenna of the night, that I believe was an antenna through which energy moved into the room, out of the room, into the city, out into the city and into the world. And some people may ask, well, how is that art? And it's art because I'm an artist. It's also art because it was the deepest and the loftiest intention of art.
One of the things that the practice teaches us is that we have to have our own boundaries to work well together. Have to have our own connection.
to move people closer to who they are, or closer to the humanity that they are about. And that was my work on the second night. This represents the present. That installation represents the future. The last one represents the past. And you'll notice that each frame gets smaller and smaller because you're moving from who you are as a present man all the way to the last frame that represents you as a boy. I believe the meal is the very first institution. Before there was the institution of civil government, before there was the institution of education, any ISDs, before there was the institution of religion, there was the intuition of the meal. The meal was the first space where we learned how to love and live. I returned to the first institution for the last installation of my residency for anthropological reasons, for sure, but also for personal reasons. The dinner was an amnesia therapy for me in the midst of one of the most traumatic moments of my life, which was my divorce. I literally kind of forgot who I was through the trauma of the divorce, what I could contribute and why I was important. And I was in this loft that I'm in right now, and even though the loft is beautiful, in that moment it felt like a cave. So I seduced two friends of mine, Anthony Suber and Brian Ellison, to my studio at the time, and I asked them to help me make a dinner table out of reclaimed wood from my big mama's house in Homer, Louisiana. And later at that table, in this space, I curated a series of salon dinner parties called Amnesia Salon Therapy. So I turned what pissed me off about my loss into a provocative curiosity around what could I do in this space to cultivate new possibility in the city for my baby. And I riffed off of the Italian expression of a salon dinner party that was inspired by the Medici family, where Mama Medici brought together a cross-pollination of vocations to create this ecology of renaissance and transformation by allowing doctors to sit next to lawyers and lawyers to sit next to artists and artists to sit next to architects, and architects learned things from artists they didn't learn from their architecture contemporaries, and teachers learned things from bankers that they couldn't learn from their contemporaries. And so the cross-pollination of vocations at those dinner tables in Mama Medici's salon turned into an evocation for a new Italy. I riffed off of that, and also this indigenous understanding of the griot as the African storyteller, who believed that story was a way to navigate culture, to bring culture to its essence. Later on, Brian Ellison and Anthony Suber and I decided to turn our table and this practice that came out of the table into a way to create space for healing for Black men. The masks that we wear as Black men impair our vision. And when the vision of the Black man becomes clear, the sum total of human flourishing broadens. Not just the Black community benefits from a Black man with a clear vision, an empowered vision. Not just the Black family. The contribution that the Black man makes to the Black family, that the Black community makes to the cities, that the cities make to the world, broadens and deepens the sum total of human flourishing. All of humanity benefits from Black men being whole. So we decided to unpack those key elements of it and turn it into a rite of passage. Like, how could we allow men to travel inside the Brown Gallery as a rite of passage that moved them through these series or these installations of suspended frames into the present, then into the future, then into the past, to write letters to their present, their future, and their past selves, to give them the right to be the fullest expression of who they are. I am so grateful for the opportunity to have had this residency, and I want to thank Hesse and all the staff at CAM. I want to thank CAMHLAB. I want to thank Janice. You will never know how transformative and affirming this residency was for me. And man, I just get emotional thinking about what it meant to do this work in my city before I leave it. A city that I've been doing this kind of work in for many years. And dear Houston, I love you. Dear Cam, I appreciate you. And for those who support the city of Houston through the CAM, continue your support for the work of artists like me and for the impact that we can make for people like you. Peace.